We are in our second week of a series based on the book Finding Yourself in Transition by Reverend Robert Brummett. And as has been noted, we are a church in transition. We have members in transition. We have members making their transition. And at the same moment, I spoke about Shelley earlier. The same day he made his transition, little Wyatt, who is with us this morning, came into the world. So with every ending, there is a new beginning. And that is something that we have to remember sometimes, every time, actually, in order to make our way through it. So many of us, especially now in the age that we live in, have come to view change as something that happens instantaneously, or should, because we need to get on with it, whatever it is. I think if we took a look at all the movies that are being made now and compared them with movies that were made back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, we would find a lot more jump cuts than slow fades and dissolves that they used to use, because we need to get to the next scene right now. And that's kind of indicative of who we are as a culture. As Robert talks about, for so many thousands of years, human beings were part of our environment. We did not set ourselves apart from it. We lived with the rhythm of the seasons and the tides and the day and the night, the moon and the sun. Time was measured in cycles of birth and growth and death and rebirth and growth and death and on and on. And it actually wasn't until our Israelite friends, the same folks from whom we borrowed the Hebrew Bible and, found Jesus. It wasn't until they started taking account of years that the concept of linear time entered culture. So you go from that culture to one now where almost every one of us has in his or her pocket or purse a phone which will also tell us our schedule down to the moment. And anytime someone asks us what we'll be doing, we can tell them because we know. As Robert pointed out, almost none of us anymore today eat when we're hungry, sleep when we're tired, or get up when we're rested. We eat when it's mealtime, we go to bed when it's bedtime, and we wake up when the alarm goes off. Right? And all of our life is kind of predicated on that. Let me ask you, just out of curiosity, when you have time off, if you do, how many of you turn into night owls, staying up to late hours of the night and then maybe sleeping in? Okay? How many of you are those early risers that just like to get up, crack of dawn and go to bed early? Right? And yet we all bind ourselves to the same schedules. We have gone from being part of nature to being part of the machine. And Robert calls that the mechanistic paradigm. It's essentially doing things the most efficient way possible without regard to the natural processes at work in us or the environment. Now, certainly that has made us, in a way, more productive. And yet, it has come at a cost. There are certain processes which simply need to occur in the time that they need, one step at a time. And sometimes bad things happen when we try to hurry those along. Now, back in the 70s, a process that didn't get talked about much on television was explored by our friends Archie and Edith in All in the Family. And I would like to show you a little clip of what happened one day when Archie decided to interrupt a natural process at work.
And the only way you're going to get me to go to Scranton if some screwball hijacks the aeroplane. I know all about your woman's troubles there, Edith, but when I had the hernia that time, I didn't make you wear the truss. Come on, Archie. No, Edith. If you're going to have a change of light, you got to do it right now. I'm going to give you just 30 seconds. Now, come on, Jim.
Can I finish my soup first?
The soup is lousy. Forget it. You get on the phone and call a lodge and confirm that the bunkers is going on to Florida as pre-deranged.
Yeah, Archie.
Hop on it, Edith.
Right away, Archie. He don't think I'm old. He loves me.
And that is that, after your fancy doctor telling me to be agreeing with it, to be kind, to be patient, to be a jerk. I showed the 2 years here how to handle a change of life, and you better remember it, meathead. And now everything is back to normal around here. Edith, are you getting that phone number?
No! I don't want to go to Florida. I don't want to go anywhere. And if you want to make a phone call, you make it yourself.
Well, back to the gynecologist.
Yeah. I know it seems very quaint today. That was the first mention of menopause on network television ever. But as we can see, Archie's trying to hurry nature along did not work out so well for him. And, it seems that even though we are really taking things to extreme in a lot of ways, and, I think about not just the simple things that have to do with our schedule, but things that are very important to us. When we look at our bodies and the things that we put into them, back in the day, people had to grow their own food. Most families had a truck garden, Some people raised chickens and cows. A lot of the food that we ate was a lot more fresh. It was a lot of work. You had to get up first thing in the morning, milk cows, go out, grab some eggs, whatever. My family used to have a garden down on the riverbanks of the Ohio River, and as I was, growing up, I really disliked going out there and pulling weeds and doing all those things that we had to do. But then we'd have some really great green beans all winter long. And of course, to make things easier, we have mechanized and industrialized the production of food. And so now what we have is a lot of stuff that has been put together by someone somewhere very far away, and in order to make that profitable, there are a lot of extra chemicals and things in our food. Even, Frankenfood, we have things that have been kind of put together in the lab. And it's like, here, you eat this, it's good. And some of us are beginning to realize, you know what? I don't think I want to put that in my body. We're beginning to realize, you know what? Maybe closer, having that garden right outside the window, not such a bad idea. I noticed one of our members on Facebook has this little kind of pot thing that has like 20 plants growing out of it. It's just one little white thing that has got all these holes in it and plants grow out of. And she's getting fresh vegetables off of that. We could all do that. And I think as time goes by, we're beginning to hear that call. We're beginning to feel the urge of nature, coming back to us. And speaking of food and things we put in our body, how we take care of ourselves. Our healthcare system has become so used to treating symptoms and not underlying causes that we just give somebody a pill for whatever is wrong with you without looking and saying, well, maybe do you need to change your lifestyle a little bit? Are you under a lot of stress right now? Do you need to change your diet, get rid of some of those chemical-y things you've been eating? Stop driving through the drive-through on the way home every night? Is there a slower but more natural healing method that would truly heal you rather than just covering up a symptom? My mother died rather unexpectedly about 10 years ago. And she had a lot of things wrong with her for a very long time, but she went into decline and died very quickly and unexpectedly. And when we spoke to her doctor afterwards, and we said, what happened? What went wrong? And he said, well, your mother had between 16 and 22 diagnosable conditions. Interesting coincidence. When we cleaned out her medicine cabinet, she had 16 prescriptions. Current ones. That number stayed with me. So I'm very pleased as I see that we are beginning now to explore holistic and alternative methods to heal ourselves, that we're looking for underlying causes. I think if we had my mom back, if we simply were able to get her body alkalized and uninflamed, that probably she would have been down to 2 or 3 conditions that were more easily managed with sleep, exercise, diet, water, sunshine, meditation. Those slow but natural processes that we can all use to heal ourselves. But they're not quick and they don't make a buck. And, unfortunately, we as a society do not value those things. But what we have to learn is that the transitions, the changes that go on in our bodies and in our hearts, sometimes they just take the time they take. And the best thing we can do is to allow them to have that time. There's another thing about transitions that we have to remember, and that is that even though they can upset us, even though they can be dangerous, they may be the times that we grow the most. I love Robert's analogy about transition as white water. How many of you have ever gone whitewater rafting? I grew up in West Virginia, and we have the New River Gorge that runs through the state, and the New River is one of the bigger whitewater rivers in the east. And then there's this other river called the Gauley, which it's only white water when they're letting water out of this big dam, and then it becomes one of the hairiest, whitewater rivers in America. Well, as Robert explains, the thing about white water is he likes to canoe, and taking a canoe through white water is really kind of scary. But whether you like to kayak or canoe or use one of those nice big, soft rubber rafts, the thing about white water is it's full of rocks. You can get dumped out. You can get your head knocked. You can drown. But it's a whole lot of fun. It's exciting. That's why you get in the big raft to begin with, is to hit the white water. And as you're going through it, it moves you along much more quickly on your journey. In fact, it's called what's the word? Rapids. Yeah. Those are the rapids. That's when we move the fastest. So sometimes what we have to remember is that when a transition comes along in our life, even one that's unexpected, even one we don't think we deserved, that transition may move us to the next stage in our spiritual development so much faster than we could have imagined, especially if we had just kept doing the same thing the same way. I love this quote from Khalil Gibran, and you may have heard this one before, but he says that pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. And so for so many of us, the breaking of the shell of that old life, the breaking of what was, allows our understanding of what is yet to come, of our new life, to emerge. So when we speak of transition as a process, there are three large pieces of it. And in the weeks that come, we'll be exploring each of those pieces in detail. But, very briefly, those parts are endings. Oddly enough, a transition begins with an ending. It's funny, at the end of high school, we call what happens at the end commencement, right? It's a commencement ceremony. We're already on to the next thing without honoring the fact that part of life just ended. High school is over with. Some of us had a great time in high school, For some people, what was it, Bruce Springsteen called it glory days? For some people, that's what it was. But yet, it's like, okay, you're done, out of the house. Off with you. And then, like high school graduation, commencement, so many of us want to jump from the first stage of the transition, the ending, right to the last stage, which is the new beginning. But there is something in the middle that we call the void. The void is that time in the desert, that time of questioning, that time of allowing. So the three stages then are endings, the void, and new beginnings. Now what's very interesting is that those three stages very closely resemble the rituals that many of our ancient societies and cultures that respected what is going on in nature, cultures that were part of nature. It's very much like so many of those rites and rituals that ancient cultures have. And a great example is the initiations that many cultures have when little girls and boys reach puberty and they are initiated and they then come back as adults. So there is a separation. In many cases, they're actually physically separated from their tribe in the same way that an ending separates us from whatever it was we held on to in the past. Then there is an initiation, a time when they sometimes actually go off into a wilderness, go off into the jungle, into the desert. They go away and they commune with spirit. And then there is a return and a new beginning. For many of them, they get a new name. Their parents no longer call them by their childhood name. They take on a new identity. Now, we have some rituals like that in our own society. The basic combat training comes to mind, I remember when I first arrived at Fort Sill, Oklahoma in 1986. Life as I knew it was over. I was separated from everything I knew. And they do, literally, you are not allowed for the first couple of weeks to use the phone, read a paper. They had papers back then. Do any of that sort of stuff. You are completely cut off from the world that you knew. You are put through an initiation, right? All sorts of things happen, some less pleasant than others. At the end, you are given a new identity. Private. It's a new name. Private! I was called Private for a while. But what emerges on the other side is different, and it is to be hoped somehow larger than what went in. We are beginning to allow even more rites and rituals, and the idea that that same path, that same arc, which we also call the hero's journey, by the way, And next year, I think sometime we want to do some studying on Joseph Campbell's version of the hero's journey, because it does speak to our journey as humans and all the transitions that we make. But in so many ways, so many of the things that we do are worthy of celebrating. Now, when there is a birth, when there's a death, as a society, we do pretty good at celebrating them. And finally, what we are doing is doing a little better job of taking them out of the mechanistic paradigm and returning to something that is more natural. You know, for a long time, childbirth was, we're just going to knock you out, and when you come to, there'll be a little shining bundle of joy in your arms. And, today, most women give birth a little more consciously, or a lot of them do. They're actually awake. They get to be involved in the process. It's not something that happens to them. They do it, which is the way that they did it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? In charge of the process. How about that? And on the other side, rather than having our medical establishment try to wring every last moment of life out of a dying human being, a lot of us now are saying, you know what, I'm good. I want to go into hospice. I want to be with my family. I want to be free from pain. That's all I want. Just whatever time I have left to be good time. I've seen, several of the folks who have been related to folks or even been in this congregation go through that experience recently, and it can be a very beautiful experience. Sometimes it takes patience. Sometimes that's difficult on those of us who are living. It's worth the time. It's worth it. I've had a couple of people ask me why Christine and I are going to do a release of vows ceremony. And the answer, there are a couple of answers, but I think the big answer is simply we deserve that. What we had together deserves that. And I think that if more of us at these transitions in our life allowed ourselves a time to reflect and a time to honor what was, maybe we should have little ceremonies that we do when we get fired. Releasing a job. No, really. Absolutely, absolutely. And say, you know what, that job served me for a while, and now my time there is done. And I can honor that and not hang on to that and not resent it and, carry anything forward with me that I don't need. When you trade in a car, right? Just lay your hands on the hood. Thank you. You've served me well. Going to miss you, but, time for you to go. And certainly I think that, the way that we've done divorce in this country could use a little overhaul. A lot of our more fundamental friends would just say, well, just don't get divorced. It's not right. But the truth is, hanging on to something that doesn't serve us and that is not in integrity with the highest that we are, that needs to be let go of. But it doesn't mean that at some point, at some time, it wasn't wonderful, because it was. And we can honor that and cherish that and release it. At the end of these transitions, when the young people come back to the tribe, when the hero returns from his journey, we are changed. I know that at this point in my life, I'm changed. I have more transitions to go, I sure hope, because I don't think God's done with me yet. So I kind of like the idea that I have more to do. If we need a reason to understand why this is necessary, I think that if we look at God and our relationship to God, there's a branch of theology called process theology that says that actually God is not frozen. God is in process as well. And if we're made in God's image, then it's no wonder we are in process all the time. If we're how God knows itself better, if our consciousness is God consciousness, divided into billions and billions of little viewports, then all these changes, even the ones that in the moment may hurt until we let them go, until we honor them and release them, it's all part of God knowing itself through us. And the wonderful thing about that little hero's journey that we all are on is that at the end of the day, at the end of that transition, each and every one of us has a chance to be a hero. This week, I invite you to look at the transitions in your life, because there are some, I know. We are all experiencing transition at one level or another. And just decide, how can I celebrate this? You are my heroes. Thank you for being here with me today. Please join me in prayer. Sweet Spirit, for all those who have gone, all those who are yet to come, and all those who are in transition right now, we feel your love, your power. We know your guidance, your blessings. And we understand that as this universe grows and changes, we grow and we change with it. We are one. One with you within us, one with one another, one with all that is. And so as we become one in consciousness again, we accept all the changes that it takes to bring us back home. Thank you for this day, for this time.